Nick, a young billionaire, sat alone in the VIP section of a fancy 5-star hotel. The place was beautifully decorated with expensive chairs, candlelit tables, and fresh flowers in glass vases. Everything was set for a perfect evening, but Nick wasn't happy. He had been waiting for over an hour for his fiancée, Mirabel, the woman his parents forced him to propose to. His father had warned him, "Don't come back home unless you put a ring on her finger." Nick sighed in frustration and grabbed his empty glass. He had already finished 9 bottles of expensive wine, yet Mirabel was nowhere to be seen. "Another bottle," he ordered, waving at the waitress who had been serving him all evening. Genevieve, the waitress, hesitated. She had been watching him drink since the first bottle, and now he was asking for his 10th. No normal person drank that much in one night, unless they had serious problems. But what could she do? He was a billionaire, and she was just a struggling waitress trying to keep her job. With a quiet sigh, she brought the bottle to his table and poured the wine into his glass. Nick reached for the glass, but his hand was unsteady. He missed and knocked it over, spilling the dark red liquid all over the white tablecloth. Genevieve's heart raced. He was drinking too much. She glanced around and saw the hotel manager watching her, making sure she didn't overstep her boundaries. But she couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Taking a deep breath, she slowly sat beside him. "Sir," she said softly. Nick turned to look at her, his blue eyes hazy from all the alcohol. Genevieve hesitated, but then she spoke. "Please take it easy on yourself. You're drinking too much." Nick blinked at her before smirking. "Are you my babysitter now?" he slurred. Genevieve felt a little embarrassed, but she didn't back down. "No, but if you pass out, I might have to drag you out of here," she said with a small smile. Nick let out a low chuckle. "You." He gestured at her small frame. "I'd crush you." Genevieve folded her arms. "Then maybe you should stop drinking before we find out." Nick stared at her for a moment. Something flickered in his expression. Was it amusement or something else? Then, out of nowhere, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her closer. "I like you," he murmured, his breath warm against her skin. Genevieve's eyes widened. "Sir, you're drunk." Before she could finish, Nick suddenly pulled her into his arms and kissed her. A deep, slow kiss. Genevieve froze. Her mind screamed at her to push him away, but her body refused to move. She could only feel the warmth of his lips, the smell of expensive wine, and the loud beating of her heart. Then, a sharp gasp filled the air. Genevieve's heart dropped. Standing at the entrance, looking furious and shocked, was Mirabel. Her expensive purse nearly slipped from her hands as she stared at Nick, her fiancé, passionately kissing a waitress. Her heart pounded with fury. Gasps filled the room. Hotel guests turned to watch, their curiosity growing. Some whispered, others nudged each other, eager to see what would happen next. Mirabel's face twisted in anger. Without hesitation, she marched forward, her heels clicking loudly against the shiny floor. Reaching the table, she grabbed Genevieve by the arm and yanked her away from Nick. Before Genevieve could react, slap! A loud slap echoed through the hotel lounge. Genevieve's head snapped to the side. A sharp sting spread across her cheek. She stumbled back, pressing her hand against her burning skin. The entire hotel went silent. Even the soft background music seemed to fade. Mirabel's eyes blazed with hatred. "You filthy, low-class girl," she spat. How dare you touch my fiancé? Genevieve's heart raced, her eyes stung with unshed tears, but she refused to cry. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but the weight of humiliation kept her frozen. Hotel guests whispered among themselves, some covering their mouths in shock. A few looked at Nick, waiting for him to say something. Nick sighed and ran a hand through his hair, looking unfazed. But Mirabel wasn't done. She turned to him, seething. You were supposed to propose to me tonight, and I walk in to see you kissing this. She waved her hand at Genevieve in disgust. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for me? Nick remained silent, his face unreadable. That only made Mirabel angrier. Say something, Nick. Explain yourself. Nick finally looked up and shrugged. You took too long, he said simply. Mirabel's mouth fell open in disbelief. Are you kidding me? That's your excuse. Fuming, she pointed a manicured finger at Genevieve. Stay away from my fiancé, you desperate gold digger. He's way out of your league. Genevieve felt a sharp pain in her chest, but she bit her lip, refusing to let Mirabel see her hurt. Mirabel then turned back to Nick. You better fix this mess, or I swear you'll regret it. With that, she spun around and stormed out of the hotel, her dress swishing behind her. As soon as she left, the hotel erupted into whispers. Some guests shook their heads, others chuckled, clearly entertained by the drama. Genevieve stood frozen, her cheeks still burning from the slap, her heart pounding in shock. She had done nothing wrong, so why did she feel like her whole world had just crumbled? The tension in the hotel had barely settled when suddenly the doors swung open again. Like a raging storm, Mirabel stormed back inside, her face even redder with fury. The sharp clacking of her heels echoed like gunshots, silencing every conversation. Hotel guests turned once more, their heads snapping toward her dramatic return. Genevieve barely had time to recover from the slap when Mirabel's furious voice boomed across the lounge. Where's the manager? I want this low-life fired, right now. Genevieve's heart dropped, her hands trembled slightly, but she clenched them into fists. She knew Mirabel was cruel, but this was beyond wicked. The hotel manager, Mr. Sullivan, a middle-aged man, rushed forward, sweating before Mirabel even reached him. He had handled demanding guests before, but none as terrifying as a furious billionaire's daughter. Miss Mirabel, please, he said, forcing a polite smile, let's handle this calmly. Calmly? Mirabel's eyes widened, as if he had just spoken an alien language. Did you not just see that useless waitress throwing herself at my fiancé? Genevieve's mouth opened in shock. Throwing herself? Had this woman lost her mind? Mirabel didn't stop. She dramatically pointed at Genevieve, if she were a piece of garbage. I don't want to see this thing here ever again. Fire her. Now. Gasps filled the room. A few guests even leaned forward, whispering amongst themselves. Mr. Sullivan nervously adjusted his tie. Ms. Mirabel, Genevieve is one of our best workers. She's resourceful, hardworking, and... I don't care, Mirabel shrieked, her voice rising to an unbearable pitch. A lowlife like her shouldn't be among humans. She's disgusting. The room fell into an awkward silence. Even the waiters and security guards exchanged uneasy glances. Genevieve's nails dug into her palms. The humiliation burned in her chest, but she wouldn't cry, not in front of Mirabel. Mr. Sullivan gulped, stepping forward cautiously. Miss Mirabel, I assure you, I will handle the situation. Please don't be upset. Don't be upset. Mirabel is out a mocking laugh, tossing her beautiful hair over her shoulder. Then she leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. If that girl is not fired by tonight, I swear on my next birthday, my father will not only have her thrown out, he'll have you sacked as well. Mr. Sullivan's face turned pale. He knew exactly who Mirabel's father was, a billionaire with connections in high places. If he wanted someone gone, they wouldn't just lose their job, they might never find another one. Genevieve swallowed hard. She needed this job. Without it, her mother wouldn't survive. Mr. Sullivan wiped sweat from his forehead. His voice shook as he said, "Ms. Mirabel, please, let's not act in haste." Mirabel smirked. "Oh, so you're saying no?" Her fingers immediately reached for her phone. "I'll just call Daddy." Mr. Sullivan froze. The color drained from his face faster than spilled wine on a white tablecloth. Genevieve felt her stomach twist into knots. She was in serious trouble. Her hands trembled as she clutched the hem of her apron. Her world was crashing before her eyes. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not when her mother depended on her for survival. Swallowing her pride, she dropped to her knees right in front of Mirabel. "Please, Miss Mirabel," her voice cracked with desperation, "you can punish me however you want. Just don't take away my job. This is all I have. My family. We have nothing else." Her sobs shook her whole body. Tears streamed down her face, pulling onto the shiny marble floor. But Mirabel, she stood tall, arms crossed, her lips curled into a sneer of pure satisfaction as she looked down at Genevieve, if she were an insect begging for its life. And instead of calming down, her rage only grew stronger, like fire fed with petrol. "How dare you beg me?" Mirabel's voice thundered, making a few guests at nearby tables flinch. "You should have thought of your worthless job before you threw yourself at my fiancé like a desperate gold digger." Genevieve shook her head frantically. "No, Miss Mirabel, I swear I didn't." But Mirabel had already grabbed her phone. The moment the call connected, her voice turned sugar-sweet. "Daddy," she cooed, "I need you to fire two people from Crystal 5-star Hotel, the one Senator Harrison owns." On the other side of the line, her father barely reacted. He was reclining on a luxurious leather couch, lazily sipping his vintage wine. He didn't even ask why. "Send me their details," he said coolly. "Consider it done." The call ended. Genevieve's stomach twisted painfully. She was finished. Mr. Sullivan, who had been frozen in shock this whole time, suddenly sprang into action. The sweat on his forehead doubled. His lips quivered. His hands clasped together as he dropped to his knees beside Genevieve. "Miss Mirabel, please," he pleaded, his voice shaking. "I have a family too. I've worked here 4 years. You can't just throw us away over a misunderstanding." But Mirabel's lips curled into the most wicked, thunderstorm smile. It was the kind of smile that could send chills down a person's spine. "Watch me," she said. And with that, she flipped her hair dramatically and stormed out of the hotel, as if she had just delivered a royal decree. Barely a moment later, 2 huge security guards marched in. They didn't need to say anything. The look on their faces was enough. "Genevieve, Mr. Sullivan," one of them said sternly, "please come with us." Genevieve's breath hitched. Mr. Sullivan's shoulders slumped as if the weight of the universe had just crashed on him. As they were about to be escorted out like criminals, a deep, commanding voice cut through the tension. "Hold it right there." The entire room froze. A man stood up from a corner of the hotel where he had been quietly sipping his wine. Tall, broad shoulders, impeccably dressed. His sharp blue eyes carried a power that made even the security guards hesitate. Genevieve blinked. Who was he? The man reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and smirked. "I just spoke with Senator Harrison," he said coolly. "He said these two should keep their jobs." A heavy silence fell over the room. The security guards looked at each other, confused. Mr. Sullivan's mouth fell open. Genevieve let out a shaky breath. She was safe. The man gave them a small nod before returning to his seat, as if he hadn't just saved their entire lives in a single sentence. And the best part, Mirabel was already long gone. She had no idea her sweet revenge had just been undone. Nick sat in his luxury penthouse, staring blankly at his whiskey glass. But for once, alcohol wasn't his escape. His mind was somewhere else. Or rather, on someone else, Genevieve. That worried face, the way she had looked at him with genuine concern, not the fake, calculated kindness he was used to from people like Mirabel. Nick ran a hand through his hair, letting out a frustrated sigh. Why was he even thinking about her? It was just a stupid kiss, a drunken mistake. So why did it feel like his whole world had tilted after it? He could still hear her voice in his head, soft, worried, real.
"Please take it easy on yourself. You're drinking too much."
It wasn't a demand. It wasn't judgment. It was care. Something Nick hadn't felt in a long time. And then, the look of shock on her face when he pulled her into that kiss. His chest tightened. He had been so lost, so reckless. He hadn't thought about how it might have affected her. And then Mirabel, the slap, the humiliation, the scene in front of the entire hotel. Nick closed his eyes and sighed. I was an idiot. Nick didn't waste time. He grabbed his car keys and drove straight to Crystal 5-star Hotel. When he walked into the hotel lobby, heads turned immediately. The waiters and other staff who witnessed the drama the previous night murmured. It wasn't every day that a billionaire who had just caused a dramatic scandal returned like nothing happened. The hotel manager, Mr. Sullivan, who had barely recovered from his near dismissal, almost choked on air when he saw Nick. Mr. Nick, you're back." Nick barely acknowledged him. His eyes were already scanning the restaurant area, searching for one person. Then, there she was. Genevieve. She was carrying a tray of drinks to a table, her posture stiff, her eyes dull and tired. Nick felt a strange twist in his gut. He had done this to her. She wasn't the same girl who had gently told him to slow down on his drinks. This was someone who had just been slapped, humiliated, and nearly fired in front of the entire city's elite, just yesterday, all because of him. Nick took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and walked toward her. Genevieve didn't see him coming. Not until she turned around and nearly collided straight into his chest. Oh. Her tray wobbled, and for a split second, Nick thought she was about to spill the drinks all over him. Reflexively, he grabbed her waist to steady her. Gasps erupted from the guests nearby. Genevieve's eyes widened in horror. She immediately took a step back, putting distance between them. "What are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice a mix of fear and disbelief. Nick's throat felt dry. He hadn't thought about what he was going to say. Apologies weren't exactly his strong suit, but he had to try. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I came to apologize. Genevieve's expression didn't soften. If anything, she looked more shocked. Apologize? She echoed, blinking at him like he had just grown two heads. Nick nodded, shoving his hands into his pockets. Yeah, for what happened yesterday. I was drunk. I was stupid. And you didn't deserve any of it. Genevieve stared at him for a long moment, in silence. Then, to his utter horror, she laughed. Not a soft, polite laugh, a bitter, disbelieving, "Are you kidding me?" kind of laugh. "Wow," she said, shaking her head. "So you remembered? Huh. I was actually hoping you'd be too drunk to recall." Nick frowned. "Genevieve, do you have any idea what you caused?" She cut him off, her voice rising. "I almost lost my job. I was slapped in front of an entire room of rich snobs. And now, every single person here is watching us again, probably wondering if I'm about to get fired, for real this time." Nick glanced around. Sure enough, people were staring. Genevieve let out a deep, frustrated sigh. "Look, Mr. Billionaire," she said, adjusting her tray. "Apology accepted. Now, please, just go. You standing here is making my life worse." Nick clenched his jaw. He had expected anger, maybe even resentment, but he hadn't expected her to be so done with him. And for some reason, that bothered him a lot. He wasn't used to people dismissing him like this. He wasn't used to feeling guilty, and yet, here he was, watching a girl who had no power, no wealth, walk away from him. He was the least important thing in the world. For the first time in his life, Nick felt small. A few days later, Mirabel walked into Crystal 5-star Hotel, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She had come for lunch, but the moment she stepped inside, her entire body froze. Across the hall, Mr. Sullivan was giving instructions to a group of waiters, and among them was Genevieve. Mirabel's blood boiled instantly. "How dare you guys still work here?" Fury flashed in her eyes as she stormed towards them, completely ignoring the smiling receptionist who had just welcomed her. Mr. Sullivan, spotting her approach, smiled warmly and stretched out his hands. "Ah, Miss Mirabel, welcome back to Crystal 5-star. Please, have a seat and let us serve you." Mirabel barely glanced at him. Her focus was on Genevieve, standing a few steps away, her face pale but calm. With pure hatred in her voice, Mirabel hissed, "What are you still doing here, you low-class rat?" A few guests turned their heads at her sharp voice, whispering among themselves. Genevieve swallowed hard, but didn't respond immediately. Mirabel stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Didn't I make myself clear the last time? Didn't I say you should leave?" Mr. Sullivan cleared his throat nervously. "Miss Mirabel, Genevieve is." "Shut up," she snapped. "This has nothing to do with you." Then she turned back to Genevieve, her voice dripping with venom. "Pack your things and get out, right now." Genevieve's hands trembled. She didn't want another scene. She didn't want to beg again, but her job was everything. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she held them back. Instead, she took a deep breath and whispered, "I am so sorry, Miss Mirabel, please." Before she could finish, a deep masculine voice interrupted.
"If you sack her from here, I'll have no choice but to employ her myself."
Every head turned. Standing at the entrance, Nick walked in like he owned the place, his eyes locked on Mirabel. Mirabel's lips parted in shock. Nick. Nick gave her a calm but dangerous smile. Yes, sweetheart. Mirabel folded her arms. What do you mean by that nonsense? Nick shrugged, stepping closer to Genevieve. If she loses this job, then I'll simply hire her. He tilted his head slightly. She's a good cook. She can work in my kitchen. Mirabel's eyes darkened. You wouldn't dare. Nick smirked. Actually, I would. Then he added, just to tease Mirabel further, or better still, there's a vacancy in my company for a personal assistant. Genevieve would be perfect for the role. Genevieve's heart nearly stopped. She looked at him, completely shocked, but the look he gave her was full of reassurance. Meanwhile, Mirabel was fuming. Her entire face turned red as guests and staff whispered around them. Genevieve couldn't believe it. This time, Nick was standing up for her. That same evening, Genevieve was almost done with work for the day. She wiped the last table, stretched her aching back, and was about to remove her apron when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Mom. A small smile crossed her lips as she answered, Mom, is everything okay? But instead of a warm reply, her mother was crying. Genevieve's heart skipped a beat. Mom, what happened? Through heavy sobs, her mother struggled to speak. The landlord, he threw us out. He said he can't wait till the end of the month for the rent anymore. Genevieve froze. What? But he promised to wait. She shouted, her voice shaky. Her mother kept crying. He called some men. They carried all our things outside. Genevieve, we have nowhere to go. Genevieve's hands trembled as she gripped the chair next to her for support. This can't be happening. Her mind raced. Where would they sleep? What would they do now? Her breath came out in short gasps. Mom, I'm coming. I'll be there soon. She grabbed her bag in a hurry and turned to leave, but she bumped into someone. A strong hand caught her before she fell. It was Nick. His sharp eyes studied her face. Genevieve, what's wrong? She tried to speak, but her lips only trembled. Tears welled up in her eyes. She didn't know what to do. Nick frowned as he watched Genevieve's hands shake. Her face had lost all color, and her breathing was uneven. Genevieve, talk to me. What's happened? His voice was firm but gentle. She swallowed hard and tried to keep her voice steady. My mom just called. Our landlord threw us out of the house. Nick's brows furrowed. Threw you out. But why? Genevieve's lips quivered. He said he can't wait till the end of the month for the rent. He dumped our things outside. My mom is crying. We have nowhere to sleep tonight. Nick stared at her for a moment, then pulled out his phone. Where do you live? Genevieve's eyes widened. Why? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he dialed a number. Get me my driver. Now. His tone was sharp. Genevieve shook her head. Nick, no. You don't have to. He raised a hand, stopping her. I'm not letting you and your mother sleep on the streets. End of discussion. Before she could argue, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of the hotel entrance. Nick turned to her. Come on, let's go get your mom. Genevieve's legs refused to move. Was she really about to get into a billionaire's car? She looked up at him, uncertainty in her eyes. Nick, why are you helping me? Nick sighed, running a hand through his hair. I honestly don't know, but deep down, he did. That worried look on her face wouldn't leave his mind. Genevieve bit her lip, then finally nodded. For the first time that night, she felt like she wasn't completely alone. The early morning sun had barely risen when a loud, aggressive knock echoed through Nick's mansion. Genevieve, still half asleep, jerked awake. Her mother, who had just started dozing off after a long night of stress, also sat up in fear and rushed to the. The knocking became more violent. A maid rushed in, panic written all over her face. "Sir, Miss Mirabel is outside. And, she's not alone." Nick, who was just stepping out of his bedroom, narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean she's not alone?" Before the maid could answer, the front door burst open. Mirabel stormed in, dragging two massive suitcases behind her. Her expensive perfume filled the air as she strutted forward, her high heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. She took one sweeping look around the living room, and then spotted Genevieve and her mother, who just rushed out of the guest room. Her eyes darkened. "Oh hell no," she spat, her voice dripping with disgust. "What are these cockroaches doing in my fiancé's house?" Genevieve's mother flinched at the insult, but Genevieve stood up straight, determined not to show fear. Nick, however, wasn't in the mood for Mirabel's drama. He crossed his arms and raised a brow. "Mirabel, what exactly are you doing here? And why do you have your luggage?" Mirabel tossed her designer handbag onto the couch, flipping her hair dramatically. "What does it look like, Nick? I'm moving in." Genevieve choked on air. Her mother gasped. Nick's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me." Mirabel rolled her eyes as if he was the one being unreasonable. "I am your fiancé, remember. Since you're suddenly running a charity home for these beggars, I figured it's only fair that I, your future wife, move in too." She turned to Genevieve and her mother, her lips curling into a wicked smirk. "And since there's no space for all of us, these two should get out." Genevieve clenched her fists. She wanted to say something, but before she could, Nick's deep voice cut through the tension. "Mirabel, why do I feel like you had something to do with their landlord throwing them out?" Mirabel froze. Nick stepped closer, his sharp gaze locked onto her. "You suddenly show up here, first thing in the morning, with your bags, demanding that they leave. Sounds like guilt to me." Mirabel scoffed, flipping her hair again. "Oh, please. Don't be ridiculous, Nick. Why would I waste my time on these peasants?" Nick smirked, but it wasn't his usual charming one. "Because you're obsessed with control, Mirabel. And you can't stand seeing me do something that wasn't planned by your father and mine." Mirabel's face turned red. Nick continued, his voice firm. "Genevieve and her mother are staying. If you don't like it, you're free to take your bags and leave." Mirabel's jaw dropped. Genevieve's mother looked at Nick like he was an angel sent from heaven. Genevieve, on the other hand, couldn't hide her shock. Was this the same Nick who had kissed her that night in a drunken haze? Mirabel opened her mouth, then closed it, completely speechless. At first, the mansion was peaceful. Everyone believed Mirabel had calmed down. That weekend was beautiful. But from the moment Nick stepped out of the house on a Monday morning, Mirabel turned into a nightmare. Genevieve left for work early, completely unaware of the hell her mother was left to endure, as soon as the front door shut behind them. Mirabel snapped her fingers, and the maids lined up like soldiers. "Listen up," she said, standing in the middle of the grand living room. "From now on, none of you will lift a finger to do anything while I'm here. That old woman, Sandra, will handle everything." The maids exchanged nervous glances. They weren't stupid. They knew this was wrong. One of them, a young lady named Clara, mustered the courage to ask, "But ma'am, Mr. Nick said we should take care of her." Slap! The sharp sound echoed through the room as Mirabel's palm landed across Clara's face. "Do I look like I care what Nick said?" Mirabel hissed. "If any of you pour a glass of water for that woman, I'll make sure you regret it." The maids lowered their heads in fear. They had seen what Mirabel was capable of. No one wanted to be her next victim. Then, turning to Sandra, who had been standing quietly in a corner, confused and terrified, Mirabel sneered. "Did you think this was a free stay, old woman?" She taunted. "Nick didn't bring you in as a guest. He brought you here to be my personal maid." Sandra's heart sank. "That's not true. Nick is a good man." Mirabel laughed cruelly. "Sweetheart, you don't know rich men. They're all the same. He gave you a roof over your head because he knew I needed someone to do all the dirty work in this house." Sandra bit her lip, refusing to believe it. "Now, get to work." Mirabel clapped her hands. "Scrub the floors, wash the dishes, do the laundry, clean every single inch of this house. And when you're done, start all over again." Sandra felt her knees shake. She was an older woman, not built for heavy work, but what choice did she have? The first few days, she struggled through the chores, telling herself it was temporary. Genevieve was working hard to save money for them, and she decided not to bother her daughter and Nick with her troubles. And when she thought she's adjusting to Mirabel's trouble, Mirabel changed her style. She instructed the maids never to give Sandra food again without her approval. One afternoon, after hours of cleaning, Sandra felt weak. She clutched her stomach, dizzy from hunger. She spotted a loaf of bread on the kitchen counter. Desperate, she reached for it. Before her fingers could touch it, smack, a wooden spoon whacked her hand. Sandra gasped and looked up to see Mirabel smirking at her. "Thieves get punished in this house," she said, twirling the spoon in her hand. Sandra held back tears. "Please, I haven't eaten all day." Mirabel leaned in and whispered, "Good, maybe starvation will remind you that you're just a burden." With that, she grabbed the loaf of bread, took a slow, deliberate bite, and then threw the rest in the trash. Sandra kept quiet. She didn't tell Genevieve what was happening. Every evening, when Genevieve returned home, Sandra forced a smile, pretending everything was fine. She didn't want to burden her daughter. She told herself, "Just a little longer. We'll have our own place soon." But every day, Mirabel's torment grew worse. One fateful afternoon, the sun was at its peak, blazing down on the compound while Sandra was outside, hunched over a pile of clothes, scrubbing with tired, shaky hands. Her body ached all over. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Mirabel had made sure of that. Her breath came in short gasps, but she kept washing. She had to. This was the only way to pass the time, to stop thinking about her hunger, her suffering, her daughter's blind trust in Mirabel. Just as she reached for another piece of clothing, the world around her spun, her vision blurred. Her hands went weak. Then, her body gave up. She slumped onto the stool, her head tilting awkwardly to the side, motionless. Clara, one of the housemaids, was walking towards the gate when she noticed something strange. Sandra was slumped over, completely still. Clara frowned. "Mama Genevieve, No response. Fear gripped her chest. She rushed over and shook Sandra's shoulder. Her body was cold. Clara let out a thunderous scream that shook the entire house. The scream echoed through the mansion. Everyone came running. The guards, the maids, even the drivers. And then Mirabel appeared. She walked in slowly, her silk robe flowing behind her, a smirk already forming on her lips. She looked at Sandra's lifeless body, then at the terrified faces around her, and she laughed. "Did you seriously just shake this entire house over this thing?" She scoffed, folding her arms. Clara's face turned red with rage. "She's dying, Mirabel," Clara shouted. "She hasn't eaten in days because of you." Mirabel rolled her eyes. "Oh please," she said, waving a hand. If she was truly starving, why didn't she just eat grass? Gasps filled the air. Some of the maids looked away, afraid. Others clenched their fists in anger, but Clara, with shaky hands, she pulled out her phone and dialed Nick. "Sir, it's urgent, your guest." Before Clara could finish the sentence, Mirabel slapped her hard. The sound echoed through the compound. Clara's phone flew out of her hand. Mirabel had slapped her so hard that her cheek turned bright red. Everyone froze in shock. Mirabel stepped forward, her eyes blazing with fury. "You dare interfere in my affairs," she growled. Clara staggered back, holding her burning cheek. But then, she did the unexpected. She picked up her phone and redialed. Louder, bolder. "Sir, I said it's an emergency," she screamed before Mirabel could stop her again. This time, Nick heard everything. And this time, Mirabel's smirk disappeared. For 3 days, Sandra had not moved. She lay still on the hospital bed, her face pale, her chest rising and falling weakly. Beside her, Genevieve sat, her eyes red and swollen. She clutched her mother's cold hand, sobbing softly. "Mom, please, come back to me. Don't leave me like this." Her voice cracked. She was tired, drained. She had prayed, begged, and pleaded with heaven, but her mother remained unresponsive. Nick had been in the hospital all day, every day. His usual sharp, confident self was nowhere to be found. His face was covered in worrying. He had refused to go to work, meetings cancelled, phone calls ignored, business, who cares? All that mattered now was Sandra opening her eyes, but she wasn't waking up. And it was driving him mad. He paced the room endlessly, running a hand through his messy hair. "Why hasn't she woken up yet?" he muttered under his breath. No one had an answer, and what made it worse, Mirabel's parents hadn't even shown up. Not a call, not a text, nothing. Nick clenched his jaw, his fists tightening. Unbelievable. How could they be so heartless? Their own daughter caused this, and they couldn't even pretend to care. On the 4th day, as Genevieve held her mother's hand, whispering silent prayers, then the door creaked open. Everyone turned. Mirabel and her father, Mr. Vincent Christopher, walked in. For the first time since the incident, Mirabel wasn't her usual arrogant self. She looked uncomfortable, sober. Her father, Mr. Vincent, cleared his throat and walked straight to Nick. He looked serious, almost guilty. "She didn't tell me what happened, not until you called," he admitted, shaking his head. "I'm really sorry. How is she now?" Before Nick could answer, a soft movement on the bed. Sandra's fingers twitched. Then, her eyelids fluttered. Genevieve gasped, "Mom." Nick straightened, eyes widening. Sandra slowly opened her eyes, blinking at the bright lights. Genevieve's lips trembled. "Thank you, God, Mom, thank you. You made it. You came back to me." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she clutched her mother's weak hand. Sandra tried to speak, but only managed a small, tired smile. Then, Vincent's eyes landed on her. His expression changed from curiosity to pure shock. He froze. "Sandra Williams, is that you?" Everyone in the room turned to look at him. Genevieve blinked in confusion. Nick's brows furrowed. Mirabel's head snapped toward her father. Sandra, still weak, lifted her gaze toward Vincent. Her dry lips parted, but no words came out. Vincent smiled, a small, almost nostalgic smile. His voice softened. "I'm here now. Please, just get better. The doctor said you need to relax properly." Genevieve looked at her mother. Nick looked at Vincent. Mirabel looked at her father like he had just grown two heads. What in the world was going on here? A week later, the air in Nick's house was thick with tension. Sandra sat beside Genevieve, her hands resting on her lap, her heart pounding. Mr. Vincent sat across from them, his face unreadable. Beside him, Mirabel shifted impatiently in her seat. She had been holding back her frustration for too long. Finally, she snapped. "Dad, why are we here?" she blurted out. "And what's so important that you have to say to this woman?" She shot a glare at Sandra and Genevieve. "I don't understand why you're giving them so much attention. They're not our class. They don't belong with us." Sandra lowered her gaze, hurt. Genevieve clenched her fists. But before she could speak, Mr. Vincent raised his hand. His voice was firm. "Enough, Mirabel." She blinked, surprised at the sharpness in his tone. Vincent exhaled deeply, running a hand down his face. "I have lived my life in the shadows, allowing you, Mirabel, to fill the void in my heart, because I lost the real occupants, my family." Mirabel's lips parted slightly. Nick leaned forward, sensing something big was about to be revealed. Sandra froze. Her stomach twisted in knots as Vincent's words began to sink in. Genevieve's heart pounded wildly. Then, Vincent continued. Flashback, the forgotten past. A young Vincent sat in the driver's seat, his wife, Sandra, beside him, singing softly to their little baby girl, Genevieve. The road was dark and lonely. No other cars in sight. Then, a deafening crash, the screech of metal against metal. Glass shattered, then darkness. When the world came back into focus, people were running, shouting for help. The accident involved two cars, Vincent, Sandra, and Genevieve in one. A husband, wife, and their two children in the other. Rescuers rushed to pull the victims out. But fate played a cruel trick. Sandra and Genevieve were rushed to one hospital. Vincent and a little girl from the second car were taken to another. When Sandra woke up a month later, her body was weak, her head pounding. She had no memory of what happened after the crash. "Where's my husband?" she had asked desperately. "Where is Vincent?" But no one had answers. Doctors and nurses only shook their heads. The only thing they could tell her was, she and her baby were the only survivors. Her world shattered. The pain was unbearable. But a kind family in the village took her and Genevieve in, helping them start a new life. And so, Sandra moved on, believing her husband had died. Meanwhile, in another hospital, Vincent woke up alone, weak. Broken. His wife, his baby, dead. That was what he was told. He tried to ask about them, but no one could give him a clear answer. The only survivor with him was a baby girl, the younger daughter from the other car, whose family were already dead. Everyone else had perished. Vincent, devastated, held on to the baby girl and decided to raise her as his own. He named her Mirabel. She became his only family. He poured all his love into her, trying to fill the emptiness in his heart. Years passed. He never knew that the wife and daughter he mourned were alive. Sandra never knew that the husband she grieved was breathing. And now, the truth had found its way home. Back to the present, Sandra stared at Vincent, trembling. Genevieve's hands covered her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. Nick exhaled sharply, and Mirabel. Her entire world tilted. Her father's words echoed in her head. I lost my real family, and you filled the void. Her chest tightened. She shook her head, laughing bitterly. No, no, that's a lie. She screamed, standing abruptly. I am your daughter. I have always been your daughter. Vincent turned to her slowly. His eyes filled with sadness, and something else. Regret. Mirabel felt a cold chill crawl down her spine, and for the first time in her life, she felt something she never had before, fear. The drive to Mr. Vincent's mansion was silent. Sandra and Genevieve sat in the back seat of the luxury car, their emotions all over the place. Sandra's fingers trembled against her lap. Could this really be happening? Was she really returning to the life she lost decades ago? Genevieve, still in shock, stole a glance at Mr. Vincent, who sat in the front seat, his face unreadable. This was supposed to be a joyful moment, a family reunited after years of being apart. But there was a storm waiting for them, and her name was Mirabel. As soon as they pulled up in front of the gigantic Vincent estate, Mirabel was already there, standing at the grand entrance, arms crossed, eyes blazing with fury. She had refused to ride with them. Instead, she had rushed ahead, boiling with rage. And now, as Sandra and Genevieve stepped out of the car, she let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Oh, look at this," she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "The lost beggars have finally found their way to paradise." Genevieve's hands curled into fists. Mr. Vincent stepped forward, his tone firm. "Mirabel, enough. This is your mother and sister." Mirabel's face twisted with hatred. "My what?" she screeched. "You expect me to live under the same roof with these wretched nobodies?" Sandra's lips trembled. "Mirabel, I..." "Don't." Mirabel cut her off, pointing a sharp finger at her. "You are nothing to me. You will never be my mother. And you," she turned to Genevieve, eyes full of fire, "will never take my place." Genevieve stepped forward, holding her ground. "I never wanted to take anything from you, Mirabel. All I ever wanted was my family." Mirabel kicked the mansion door open, spinning back towards them. "Well, you can have your precious family, but not in my house." She turned to her father, her voice trembling with anger. "If you let them stay here, I swear I will make their lives miserable. I will make sure they regret ever stepping foot into this house." Mr. Vincent's face darkened. "You will do no such thing." His voice was sharp. "This house belongs to me, and so does my family. If you have a problem with that, you are free to leave." Mirabel froze. Her world spun out of control. "Did you just choose them over me? My own father, Her hands trembled at her sides. She let out a shaky laugh. "You're joking, right?" But Mr. Vincent's expression remained cold. "You heard me." Mirabel's heart hammered. This wasn't happening. She suddenly turned around and stomped into the mansion, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. "But hear me, Sandra." She turned back, her eyes dark with pure malice. "You might be my father's long-lost wife, but in this house, I am queen." She jabbed a finger toward Genevieve. "And you," she spat. "You're just a nobody trying to steal what's mine. I swear on my life, I'll never let you take what belongs to me." With that, she turned on her heels and stormed up the grand staircase. A loud slam echoed as she shut her bedroom door. Sandra let out a shaky breath, her chest tight. Genevieve glanced at her father. "Are you sure bringing us here was a good idea?" Mr. Vincent's jaw tightened. "I lost you once. I won't lose you again." But as the night settled over the mansion, Genevieve couldn't shake off the dread creeping into her bones. The sun had barely risen when Nick arrived at the Vincent mansion, a single red rose clutched in his hands. He had spent the entire night restless, thinking of Genevieve, her kindness, her strength, the way her presence made his world feel different. He knew it now. He couldn't let her go. The butler, sensing the urgency in his eyes, let him in without question. Genevieve was in the grand parlour, sitting quietly by the window when he walked in. Her eyes widened in surprise as she turned to him. "Nick." Without a second thought, Nick moved closer and, to everyone's shock, knelt before her. He held up the rose. "Genevieve," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "From the very first kiss, I knew you were different. You are everything I've ever wanted in a woman." Genevieve gasped, her heart racing. "Nick." A sharp slam cut through the air. The sound of heels clicking furiously against the marble floor made them turn. Mirabel stormed in, her face red with rage. "This can't be happening," she screeched. "I am your fiancé. My father arranged our marriage." Her chest heaved violently, her hands trembling. She looked at Genevieve like she was a disease infecting her perfect world. Nick rose to his feet, his expression firm. "Mirabel, you were never my choice." "Liar," she shrieked. "My father told me you had no choice, that you were going to propose." Before Nick could respond, a deep voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Enough, Mirabel." Everyone turned. Mr. Vincent had entered the parlour, his face dark with disappointment. Mirabel froze. "Father," she whispered, suddenly fearful. Mr. Vincent's eyes bore into her, his voice cold. "I tried my best to raise you well, but your pride has finally undone you." Mirabel staggered. "What are you saying?" Her father exhaled, his face hard with truth. "I arranged your marriage with Nick because, despite all our wealth, no man wanted to be with you. Your arrogance, your cruelty, you pushed everyone away. Nick was the only one who tolerated you because of business, but now he has seen the kind of woman you are, and he has found someone with a beautiful soul. I won't stand in his way." Silence filled the room. Genevieve stared in shock. Nick remained calm, but his grip on the rose tightened. Mirabel's face turned pale. "No," she whispered. "This can't be real. This isn't happening." She turned to Nick, tears welling in her eyes. "Nick, please," she begged, "give me another chance. I will change, I swear. Just don't leave me for her." She shot a venomous glare at Genevieve. But Nick simply shook his head. "Mirabel," he said, his voice steady, "I was never yours to begin with." Her breath hitched. "And the night I was supposed to propose to you," he paused, his gaze softening as he turned back to Genevieve. "I met an angel instead." Genevieve's lips parted, her chest tightening. Mirabel let out a choked sob. "No, no, no, no." She spun towards her father, her face twisted with desperation. "Father, you can't do this to me. You can't let this happen." Mr. Vincent simply sighed. "This is your doing, Mirabel." Tears streamed down her face. With a furious scream, she turned and ran out of the room, her sobs echoing down the hallway. As the sound of her heels faded, silence settled in the room once again. Nick took Genevieve's hands. "I love you," he said, his voice full of certainty. "Will you give me a chance?" Genevieve stared into his eyes, her heart pounding. Then she smiled softly. "Yes, Nick, I will."
Hello besties! What are your takeaways from this story? Please share them with us in the comments section. We'd love to hear your thoughts. There are even more interesting stories waiting for you on this channel. Check the description below for the links to those videos. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and become part of our amazing community.
Thank you so much for watching. God bless you all. I love you.